You don't have to know the answer. I just thought it was interesting. I'm gonna let my
Uh,
friend William on, but we can all talk together. I like to have multiple people on. Hello, William. What's up?
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, I think, at least in my opinion, I think there's a little bit too much focus on the ecumenism aspect. I think that that is important, but I think a aspect of the show that, well, I remember you said you wanted to talk about it more, was the actual how, like, okay, like they're culturally Catholic, but then they sometimes they actually are Catholic. And I think that is one of the most interesting things about each character, their motivations, how they view the world and everything.
Mhm.
Because I remember
For sure.
when, yeah, when AJ is going on like the nihilism LARP, and then he's playing baseball with what's up, Pussy Bompensiero and his son. Like he's playing baseball, and he doesn't really want to play and whatnot because he's just like, oh, nothing matters. But then, and I could tell like there's something about Bompensiero, like he doesn't like he lacks the tools to properly explain why, but he can still kind of explain to Anthony like, like this matters, like sometimes you don't understand why it matters, but it does, like these important things, and you pass these on to your children, like that's
But
just
then his
life.
but then his son is way more eloquent than Pussy is, and same with AJ. He's way
Oh
more
yeah, that's right.
educated than Tony is. Like all the kids are way more well read, and like the guys who are Tony's age, they can like barely even speak properly.
Yeah, I mean that's just I think highlighting a generational difference between, Tony and Pussy's age, and then like AJ and Pussy's son. Just because I think people got more similar just through like I think their everyday life was just like for people of that generation that were younger, I feel like the average person and like what they did on a daily basis was more similar as opposed to like Tony's age because they hadn't been as assimilated into the regular American society yet.
Yeah,
Um, because like it's one thing for like Tony to go to Italy, but like it would be exactly like that. But I feel like if his kids went to Italy, they would be way more out of place.
definitely. And I also think that when I was talking about the ecumenism thing, just because I got people in the stream now, guys, doesn't mean that's it. That's the end of my topics. I would just prefer to talk about this with other people instead of, I rant all the time. It's time I take a little break. But, there are a lot of elements, like you said, William, that are actually Catholic.
Mhm.
And it's quite interesting because even Dr. Melfi, she seems to be a little less, as I guess, stereotypical Italian Jersey as like Tony is, but
Mhm.
she'll still appeal to universal ideas, even though technically she's supposed to believe in continental philosophy. So I think it's very interesting that there is a Catholic undercurrent to it, but it's still kind of lukewarm. I mean, you yourself are Catholic, right, William? So
Yes,
what
I
is
am.
your what
Yeah,
is
yeah.
your perspective of? Are you as well, Kai?
Yeah.
Oh,
Or what do
nice.
you guys think? One at a time. What do you guys think?
Do
Yeah,
you want to
it's
go first?
from what I think, yeah, it's a reflection of I think everyone likes to say the therapeutic moralistic deism. I think that's what it is. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree.
it's a really interesting era because like now that people the church whatever. So then when they disregard that, I find that's interesting that they find the objective stuff in the therapy now. And now they're getting the objective forms flowing in through the therapy. So that's an
Definitely.
interesting thing.
Yeah, I feel like it does kind of highlight the kind of okay, we're not really well catechized, and because that we have to, because a lot of people, if they're not well catechized, will just they'll find other means to be sort of intellectually fulfilled and whatnot. So of course in this case it was big, the therapy at the time. But I think the biggest way that as the question you asked me, Gene, is like, what is it about the characters that are actually Catholic? I would say it's it's not really the doctrine, but I mean it kind of is, but it's just there's this sort of way of life that you kind of observe with Catholics, like whether it's Italians or Mexicans or Hispanics, and Irish, where it's like they just kind of have fun, like they just rejoice. Like there's this really, kind of joie de vivre kind of aspect to their
Oh,
daily.
wait, that was French, and France was Catholic. There you go. You just proved
Exactly.
your own point.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Where it's like a lot of times, like, okay, it's like, what do these people like to do? They just like to hang out with friends and family, drink a coffee, visit people in the hospital, and it's
Yeah,
like we're gonna
you're
be.
right. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're right. I
Mhm.
noticed that in the show. They just seem to want to do almost nothing, but as long as you're going somewhere to do nothing, it's
Yeah.
fun. Like
Yeah, like it's basically the kind of like counter nihilism where it's like, okay, the only thing that matters is Jesus, and because we know that Jesus Christ died for us on the cross and we're saved through him, then everything's going to be okay and we should just be happy, and also what you could tell about the characters and their relationships is like, okay, even though they have like this kind of this ring of like bad sinful activities that they do, but like the interactions character to character, like just within the relationships of the family and the friends, well, not always, but generally, you could tell that they really do love each other. Like I could tell that the actual like Tony's like big like very intimate ring, like Silvio, Paulie, and all them, you could tell that they really love each other. Like
Yeah.
they will go through and through for each other. They enjoy each other's company. They like playing poker. They like just drinking coffee. Yeah. And
what do you think of that, Kai? Just want to give you a chance to
what
pop
I'm
in quick.
thinking and ruminating about is because of the materialism, the materialist assumptions, 80s, 90s, whatever. I think the theme I see is like, they're all giddy happy, Jesus loves us, and like, the kind of pushover mom type, like 2000s video games. Christians are freaking out over video games. I remember being a new atheist, be like, these Christians hate GTA.
That's what I was saying. Like,
Yeah,
oh
like,
man,
are you
mom won't let me
serious?
play Harry Potter. Like, she won't let me read Harry Potter, so Christianity's debunked because I can't read the Philosopher's Stone or whatever.
And so,
Yeah.
what I think happened is because of the bad catechism and life is good. I think what happens, we forgot how to weep, and it's kind of the same cycle with the Israelites. I think we just forgot how to weep properly. That could be something.
I think it's a good point, and like I said earlier as well, before you guys hopped in, I think at this point life had become so good that Christianity became PH Joy. What is this? I can't even respond.
It became a nice guy.
Well, I didn't have any battles to fight, so it's like, what's the most evil
Yeah.
thing in the world? World of Warcraft. I guess I better declare war on World of Warcraft or something. So it's like there's nothing to really combat, and I also think it just didn't. People, especially in America, didn't know how to translate Christianity, especially detached from Europe, in this hyper tech society. Like, there's what do we do? Like, we just get on TV and command people to read the Bible? I mean, I don't know. So it was an interesting time period for sure. Things are much different now in influencer culture and so on.
Yeah, no, and also, Jim, a point you made about like in that time with AJ, there was no real Jay Dyers or anybody to listen to. I think that's very true when helping us understand why, as bad as like a philosopher or as bad as a person can get in their beliefs, like it can help you understand, okay, that's probably why they thought it was the case. Because like Nietzsche, the only exposure he had to Christianity was just like his milquetoast like dad who was like a Lutheran pastor who just preaches about being nice, and I'm sure, yeah, a lot of Christians at his time were just kind of lamos, and there was no internet, there was no way to see, okay, wow, this is actually the really, really cool, enriching history of Christianity. Okay, you got the Eastern churches, you got the Pope who stopped Attila the Hun from sacking Rome. Like that's when I learned about that. I was like, I didn't know that. That's so cool. Why don't they teach us about that?
Well, another thing also, I don't want to do too much on Nietzsche's career, but if you read his stuff, like he's mainly going off against like really kind of heretical forms of pacifism and like Platonic mysticism and stuff. So he kind of blends them together. But per the Sopranos, before we get too carried away, I do think that integral thing to mention is that I think this show and Lost, if you guys haven't seen Lost, is really good as well.
Never seen it.
Are really like, if you want to know what is the idea of the mid to early 2000s, which came in from the 80s and 90s, if I could sum it up in a sentence, it would be history is over. Now we're living in post history. Nobody thinks that anymore, thanks to all these wars and COVID and crazy stuff that's happened. Nobody really thinks that anymore. But back then, it was like, life is so good, we don't need to fight each other over religion. Like, history is over. Like, World War II, that was it. The Cold War, that was kind of the end. History's done. And in Lost, you see that. And there's even documentaries on BBC. I've posted one of them, like a part of it, before on my channel, where the narrator walks in and literally says, people say history's over. And it's from like the late 90s. And people genuinely thought, like, there's going to be no more conquests and wars and stuff. Like, we're all just going to be cool and do our 9 to 5s. Not the case, clearly. But that's what people thought.
Yeah, no, and I think I don't know how old you are, but I kind of like, I assume we're all similar ages. We're like, we kind of grew up in the tail end of that. You know, I would say like early 2000s is the very tail end of that, kind of like the boomer paradise, you know. And I remember this is an idea you talked about, Jim, in your analysis of Over the Hedge.
Oh yeah, I forgot I did that.
Yeah, and that movie does a really good job of just showing, like, yeah, suburbia is pretty lame, you know.
That's actually another great example. We got Over the Hedge, Lost, and The Sopranos. If you guys haven't watched that, you haven't filled the Dream curriculum yet. So get to it. Watch that DreamWorks.
Yeah, I don't. Have you seen Narcos, Jim?
I haven't. What is that about?
Well, it's about the the cocaine trade from Colombia and whatnot, and it's it takes inspiration from a lot of the other kind of crime father Sopranos. So it's basically, instead of Tony Soprano being the main character, it's Pablo Escobar, but it's actually more, it's told from the perspective really of Steve Murphy, which was the main DEA agent tasked to capturing Pablo Escobar. But it's interesting because you actually you see Pablo Escobar through his whole career, from when he started out to when he, when they killed him. But I think this is more, this is actually something I read in real life. I really wish they would have put it in the show, but I was getting about the how the characters almost are, like, they are still Catholic, like in a genuine sense. So Pablo, do you know anything about the story of how he made his own prison and it was total BS?
A little bit. Yeah, a little. And guys, to those who just joined, I will let you on in literally 1 minute once William has given us the introduction to this show. Then I'll let you guys on. Go
it's this really cool story, and then I'll give other people the time they need. So Pablo, they were like, the Colombian government's like, all right, you're arrested. And he's like, okay, I'll go to jail. I get to make my own jail. And of course, they caved, and they're like, okay, cool. And so he was still running operations from inside his fake jail, which was called La Catedral, the cathedral. And so the bishop of Medellin disguised himself as a milkman, delivering milk to his prison. And then once he actually got inside, he revealed who he really was. And Pablo was just astonished, and he asked him who sent him. And he said, who sent me? The one who will judge you in the end. So, and that's Pablo, cool. He's appealing to his sentiments because Pablo, when he grew up, he grew up in a peasant family in Latin America. He, as a little boy, likely, revered Catholic priests, and that's a lot of children actually do that too. But and so then the bishop demanded that he confess himself and then he give up the life of crime. And Pablo, he made a confession.
There you go.
Yeah, so
cool. I will have to check that series out and give me more material to talk about on here, obviously. But really good recommendation for sure. I'm going to let, and Kai and William, you guys can stay here and keep talking, but I'm going to let Ahmed on, then Young Gamer, and then Two Crooks. What's up?
Hi, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. I'm gonna have to go to work soon, so I'll just be brief. A perfect image. I was just gonna talk about that.
I thought you'd want to.
Yeah. So ecumenism. I think ecumenism is really something tempting, something useful for the majority religion to always want to do. It's not just Christianity. When I say Islam does it in Indonesia, I really mean it. It's not just lazy laity still wanting to practice paganism. No, it's an actual philosophical movement. Actually, look it up. I'm gonna write it down in the chat. It's called Islam Nusantara.
Yeah,
Nusantara is a ancient
I
name for
remember you
Indonesia. It's an
mentioned.
actual
I remember you mentioned
it's
that
an
before.
actual philosophical movement in Indonesia. Um, it's basically Islam trying to be ecumenist with other religions in Indonesia, and it's an actual philosophical movement, similar to what you see over here. And I think the reason why ecumenism happens for all religion is that even though you're the dominant religion, there is a benefit in getting people to unite in society, right? So when you can get rid of that religious roadblock, then yeah, you're gonna try it out. The pagans did it, for example. I think with Sol Invictus. Um, well, yeah, Christians do it, like what you're showing here. So I don't think it's a new phenomenon. I think it's just something that's very tempting to do. Indonesia
Well,
has it
I
too.
would I would definitely say that it's been tried in the past, but never to the extent that it has been since like the end of the world wars for sure. Like the Vatican II stuff, and then the Pope John Paul II councils were like enormous, enormous compared to in the past. You had some people like Saint Francis of Assisi going, "Hey, we should try to be kinder and reach out to Islam," but he was like one of thousands of people, and most people would have disagreed with him. But he would have had a following in that endeavor, but most people still disagree. Whereas I think it's become a lot bigger, kind of on all fronts today. I think a lot of that has to just do with the fact that ease of communication, internet and technology, more globalized economy. So there's less countries who are just out there doing their own thing, disconnected from everybody else. I do think that that's definitely part of it. As for the pagan thing, I'm still, and I learned this from a German. I don't know whether he's French or German, but I'll give you his YouTube channel as well. I think honestly that European paganism all kind of comes from the same place. I think they're all pretty similar. So I don't think they really had a need to unite because they were similar to begin with in a way. But yeah, thank you very much for that perspective from the Indonesian slash ex-Muslim context.
I have one last question, and you might answer that, but I have to leave soon.
Okay.
So with with ecumenism or the desire to compromise your religion, even if you're the majority, in order to unite society wholly, how do you think Christianity is going to solve that? Because you know, for someone secular perspective who see religion as, I guess you could say, just human culture and evolve for the needs of its time, um, how are you going to make sure that that your religion is not just going to evolve into Abrahamism or other conveniences for the sake of social needs?
Well,
Thank you.
believe it or not, I think the disagreements of Christianity will make sure that that will probably never happen. As in, there's too many versions of Christianity for everybody to just agree on something like that. Even within Catholicism, and that's the most top-down, militaristic, uh, like sect of Christianity, where they can very easily just set things in motion and everybody kind of has to believe it. There's still, I would say, the majority of Catholics have something critical to say when these kind of liberal things are revealed, or not even revealed, but just implied. Like Kai and William, do you guys all support Catholic ecumenism just because some Catholics do it? Probably not, I'm guessing.
No, I mean there is not for ecumenism, but one of my priests actually explained to me that obviously a broken clock is right twice a day, and that a lot of people that are ecumenists, they're right in the sense that yes, like I mean specifically when it's applied to Christianity, like this doesn't work with like Islam or like Buddhism or anything. But when we're talking about Christianity, like yes, we want to try to have like more Christian unity and whatnot. So it's right about that. But what is not correct is obviously like, oh, well, we believe these two completely contradictory things. Like that's not okay, obviously. But they are right in the sense of yeah, it's better to be arguing united, I guess. That's what he told me.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. Kai, what do you think of this topic overall? What's your
Yeah, ecumenism, you got the boundaries, but I know Peter Diamond will show those photos and stuff. But I do think it is, even from the microcosm, as Jonathan Pageau would say, I think we should unite against progressivism. When I was going through confirmation, I was like, the Protestants, but I mean, I think classical liberalism and progressivism are just way much more of a problem right now than just like bickering.
Yeah, I agree because, I don't think anybody's really declaring war on each other, Protestantism versus Catholicism. So
Yeah.
society's changed so fast in the West, which is where, for a long time, the heartland of Catholicism and Protestantism was, that those divisions aren't as extreme as the division between both of them and their bubble versus, as you said, classical liberalism. So it's interesting. But, as we all know, classical liberalism, and someone mentioned the theosophical beliefs of the UN, are all based on Christian mysticism in some way or another. So even the evil, classical liberalism and stuff, it's not like it's not impossible to understand. They get all their stuff from Christianity. They just flip it around and invert stuff. So it's easy to view that once you're aware of that. But I do agree with you guys about that. But I don't think that we should leap totally into ecumenism, because that might be a trap where it's like, oh hey, not defeated, but we clamped down on classical liberalism. People are more religious, but now we've mashed together all these sects and it doesn't make sense. So there still should be a dividing line somewhere.
Yeah.
And
But,
thank you, Ahmed, for calling in. I'll remove you
sorry.
from the thing for now. Please call back when you are, if you have time when you're back. I'm gonna let Two Crooks, or no, I'll let Young Gamer, and then I'll let Two Crooks in. How's it going, Young Georgian?
Hello. When you guys were talking about proper catechesis, it led me to think about my home country, like I always do. But
Sakartvelo.
yes, the Cartvelo, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Good pronunciation. Thank you. I will say that we were lucky enough to not have such a revolution, because at the time, early 90s, we were kind of we were kind of more worried about the issues of Russia, and the internet was still a growing thing. We just came out of the Soviet Union, and of course we were still an atheistic state at the time. So there was a massive emphasis when the church rebuilt itself on proper catechesis, so much to the point that the church itself basically was a part of the school. You know how there's Catholic school? There is no such thing as Orthodox school in Georgia. It would just be school. Orthodox is talked about in school. We know about the history, or at least the praxis. Like, they will make fun of Catholics a lot of the time in Georgian school, because they'll be like, "Oh, you guys only have like one singer or two singers. We have three. We have polyphonic singing in our church. You only have the priest sing," which is not like, if you go to an average V2 mass, half the time they don't even sing. So it's very weird. I would say, regarding ecumenism, we see it now, especially with the Muslims in Europe. Like, every time I have an argument with a Muslim in Europe, they will say, "Oh," they will appeal to the thing you've always talked about before, Jim. "Oh, this abstract monotheism in which one God necessitates it to be my God."
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. Like, there are some liberal Muslims who will like say, "Oh, Odin was a prophet." I mean, I think most Muslims.
Oh, what? I've never heard it that far.
There's a famous WhatsApp video that circulated, and some guy's on a live stream, and someone's like, "Hey, dude, what's with?" Because he had a ring like this and had Odin on it, and he was asking like the Muslim guy, "What's with Odin? Like Odin, L.A.?" He's like, "No, Odin's not L.A. Odin is actually a prophet, and Thor was his apostle." It was like, I mean,
Oh man,
kind of berserk.
Yeah, I love that meme. But I would also say something like, as a Protestant, I have no problems with learning the Eon Catholics as far as being ecumenical, but never pagan and false gods. Why'd you put up your hand, bro? You can speak.
I was
whenever,
gonna
right?
ask. I was gonna ask if I could talk about
Hey,
something.
this is school. I will.
Okay, because
Go
it's related to this. Since like the Trump victory and stuff, I think like basically what I'm thinking is like, what's gonna be the new classical liberalism if progressivism really gets booted out? Because I noticed some of the crystal girls, like crystal people, hermeticism, a lot of those
New
people are
Age, yeah.
voting. All of those people are supporting Trump. So I wonder what form
Really?
if progressivism gets booted out. This is from family experience and just looking around online.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if progressivism gets booted out, like what's going to be the new type of universalism, but without
Well,
progressivism?
Yeah, great question. So
Mm,
that's
yeah.
the thing. I think when we talk about progressivism and modernism, and guys, if you're watching, you're expecting like to do 3 hours on Tony Soprano's dress code or
Oh.
something. We're not doing that. Obviously, it's good to get into these topics because this is kind of the heart and soul of what a lot of these shows are made of.
The
But I think
metaphysics of the Italian tracksuit.
yeah, the
you know?
metaphysics of the Italian tracksuit. But yeah, no, I
I
mean,
love those.
to answer that, I would say I think hyper progressivism is going to really just be an internet fad. This whole you got to support transgender furry abortions or something like that. That's never going to go beyond the internet. But I also think that millions of people, probably over 100 million people in the United States, have been radically pushed further right than what a lot of people thought was possible. And this whole an election thing between Biden and Trump in the last 8 years has definitely been the cause of that. And so there's been more polarization. I think that what you're going to see is you don't necessarily have to be a liberal to do this kind of ecumenistic stuff. Like you could be perfectly conservative,
Yeah.
in our standard of what conservatism is, and still say, I don't want to fight about religion. Let the Muslims have their, whatever country I don't ever want to visit, and I'm going to stay here and be Christian. And let's just leave it like that. And it doesn't matter if we disagree on theology. You might still see a lot of that, even if people aren't liberal. They're just going to be like, yeah, I don't want to disagree on theology. Let everyone do what they want, except liberal stuff. But otherwise, I don't care what the Buddhist guy believes. I think you might see more of that still.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, like there's varying ideas, obviously, in ecumenism, kind of like I was telling you what my priest told me, how he's like, the way I view it, I think what ecumenism should be is like, okay, getting everybody to the Catholic Church, but it's like some people are obviously closer in belief than others. So the easiest, like people that, like the closest people to us is obviously Eastern Orthodox. So like that's what we do with the Eastern Catholics is like, okay, they're Orthodox Christians, but it's like, we can argue and discuss, but it's better to argue and discuss in communion. Like that's the whole point. But the vast majority of ecumenists he explained are obviously, missing the point or are heretics. So
yeah, for sure. Before we
because
get
that doesn't
carried
apply
away,
to Mormonism or something like that,
right? I do want to let Two Crooks in for his valuable contribution. I can't see him though. I think I need to make it smaller. Yo, Crook.
Hey man, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Yeah, good. So it's other boy from the Caucasus here.
Uh-oh.
So just like what our Georgian friend said over here, there is a large degree of relatability, though of course I am a diasporan Armenian, but I think what makes Armenians from Armenia and Armenians in the diaspora a pretty interesting contrast is that we kind of have similar views on faith in that it is directly ingrained as part of our culture. And when it gets down to it, the overwhelming majority of Armenians, both within Armenia and in the diaspora, would say they believe God exists. And any lack of religiosity is not so much a result of the culture, but often a result of geography, as in there's no church nearby or Armenian or Oriental Orthodox church nearby or Eastern Catholic church nearby that would keep up such a faith or such cultural traditions alive. But when
I
these
did notice
Armenians,
one thing. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Crook, but I noticed that when you're off the internet and you're in real life, whether it's boomers or much older people, the Oriental Orthodox and the Eastern Orthodox tend to really mesh together when they're outside of the East, especially. So, like, if they're in France, Germany, or America, I'll see a lot of OOs go to an EO church and they'll identify just as plain Orthodox. Be like, hey, you know, the Western sects are whatever, but we are part of Orthodox civilization. I think a lot of Armenians still hold on to that belief.
Right. I'd say they can, especially because, to be a little blunt, a lot of lay people aren't aware there's a difference between Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox.
I
They
agree.
all believe it is this one big continuum, which is not exactly accurate. Any divisions, as our Georgian friend can attest to, are probably mostly political. So, for instance, this whole pan-Orthodoxy thing might fall apart when a Georgian and a Ukrainian run into a Russian, for instance, and they're very, let's just say, opinionated about recent wars and conflicts. But there is this idea that when we're going to look at the other Christians we will get along with, they will go out of their way to look for more Orthodox-oriented Christians first and foremost. And therefore, I also feel that when Armenians return to Armenia, a religious conflict or a religious revelation isn't exactly on the top of their minds, because unlike, say, the Italian Americanized diaspora versus the Italians in Italy, there's not so much of a big shift. And for Armenians in Armenia, you'd think they'd be the ones who'd be a bit more atheist than the diaspora, as opposed to the Americanized Italians versus the Italian Italians. But
Yeah.
as I stated before, Stalin went through this weird mix of simultaneously being proud that he was from the Caucasus versus being ashamed he was in the Caucasus.
Hmm.
Young
like
gamer, yeah. I don't know if young gamer's going to go through that as well, but let's hope not. But
No,
that also
bro.
meant that Armenian Christianity was not seen as much of a threat, and therefore Armenians in Armenia are still pretty religious to this day.
Let me ask you a question really quick. But I don't mean to interrupt, but since I do want to kind of reel us back to the Soprano / Law / Boomer 2000s television
Yeah.
idea, are you familiar with these kind of shows? Like, you don't have to have actually watched them, but do you get kind of the theme that I'm talking about here? This kind of non-theological, just, hey guys, we're at the end of history. Like, history's over. We don't need wars and divisions anymore and stuff like that. Is that at all common amongst your own people, amongst Armenians, or is it like that just has absolutely no relevancy for them whatsoever?
I would say no, because after the USSR collapsed in the late 80s, early 90s, we had the Karabakh War. For those in the diaspora, we were dealing with the aftermath of the Lebanese Civil War. And it's funny this was happening in the 2000s, because didn't the War on Terror just pretty much start and there was no end of history? So I don't know why Hollywood would think that, but I guess maybe they're 10 years behind, because for those who are in the Middle East and for those who are living in the ex-USSR, history was pretty much far from over. Maybe amongst Armenians in Armenia, I'd say they could have felt it a bit after the Karabakh War. The first one ended in our victory, and they thought there was nothing more to strive for.
Yeah.
But with more conflicts arising, especially because of the close proximity to Russia, to Georgia, to Iran, I'd say that mentality might have dropped very quickly if they ever had it in the first place, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised. Diaspora Armenians, no chance. For many diaspora and Armenians, the Middle East is seen as our core as well. And by the Middle East, I mean, the Mashriq and the Middle East proper. And there's always something going on there. There's no way to read end of history in that part of the world.
The reason I mentioned it is because you might think this doesn't make any sense, but I mean, I'm sure you get it. But
Yeah.
overall, the audience may not. That's fine. The audience may not understand why this occurs, but I think not a lot, but a good enough portion of Lebanese Christian boomers actually do have this idea. Like, they do, like, they're Christian. They're never going to become Muslims or anything. But they do kind of have this aversion to being too serious about it. And like, hey, let's just get along. Like, the age of like hating each other's over. Like, let the Muslims do what they want. We'll do what we want. And, we don't care about medieval Pope stuff. I'm a Catholic, they'll say, but I don't care about medieval Pope stuff. And I just kind of want to like enjoy life. I've seen a lot of boomer Lebanese Christians who are exactly like that. Like, our history's over. Like, all these wars are just stupid in the Middle East. We should be better than these savage Arabs who are killing each other. So I think that it's common amongst Lebanese. My own parents are like that sometimes too.
Jim, that's impossible. In Lebanon, the ride never ends. That's impossible.
It is, but there's a lot
I
of people
know.
I've spoken to when I visited, and they'll be like, yeah, oh, this is a complete shithole, and we're on the brink of annihilation from Daesh, for example. But, history's over. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you're like a medieval warlord, like 10 feet away. How is history over? But a lot of them will still have that view, maybe from idolizing the West, something like that. I don't know.
I think they're in self-denial, probably maybe out of all the stuff they've seen or heard about, they just desperately want it to end. But I will say, I do think an ideal situation for Lebanon or the Middle East is, yeah, exactly. The Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Druze, we all have our own religion. We all believe in what we want to believe. We do wish the others would convert to our faith, of course. But as long as we're not doing ultra blasphemous stuff and trying to behead each other for being infidels or heretics, I think that's the way to go forward for the Middle East. And I do mention Druze, but once again, they don't even know what they believe in, so good luck with that.
They don't have nothing. Joey Paisano, like this guy's like, hey, you're attacking Italian Americans. You're disparaging them. You can come onto the stream. I'm not attacking Italian Americans at all.
Jim, I just thought of another point because I remember you asked me, well, okay, William, you're Catholic. Like, what is it about the characters that are genuinely Catholic? Something I actually forgot to say. It's true in Sopranos, and it's also true in like The Godfather and Narcos, is that they don't blaspheme. Like that is like the lowest form of of human activity for them. Like they'll murder, they'll rape, they'll pillage and all that bad stuff. But like if you say something bad of like about Mary in front of them, they'll flip out. That to them is like disgusting. Also like tattoos, they're like, that's stupid. And like you could tell like the men in the show, like end of that time, like you could still tell like visually, like, okay, like they're men, not in like the cringe, like Andrew Tate, like, oh, I'm a man, but like you can tell like, yeah, they're men.
Remember
like they have
the
normal
Polly freakout
haircuts.
scene?
Oh, sorry.
Remember the Polly freakout scene? I love that scene when like they're doing like they're sitting at the table. We're gonna find your parents, and Polly is like, it's black.
Oh, yeah.
But
I ain't got no kids.
I think it's like an identity thing. It's kind of like the whole Alex O'Connor, your environment, bro. You're just shaped by your environment, man. I think it kind of reflects that idea. It's like, oh, it's my identity, bro. It's just my will to power. It's my identity. So
I agree with that. There's a lot of other instances, like you mentioned, William, in The Sopranos and in other shows that are kind of adjacent to that, where people will do stuff very contradictory to their religion, but then there's a line that you cannot cross, for instance. So I always find that to be interesting. Like Tony, for instance, he's fine with killing people, but he hates when people will kill animals who are defenseless or something like that. So he has kind of this like infantilization of animals because he's lost faith in people, it seems. And so I always found that to be extremely interesting and honestly kind of relatable part.
The childless cat lady.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I have a question about the show. Do they ever talk about North versus Southern Italians? Because I did go to Italy in the summer of 2023. It's mostly Southern Italians, what we associate with Italian culture. North Italy is much more like Austria, Germany.
Well, yeah, for sure. So I've talked about North-South Italy a few times on my streams, but in the show, it's more like passing comments. They don't devote a whole scene to it or anything, but they go to Tony's mother, and this chef, Artie Bucco, brings her a dish, and it's like risotto or something. I says, I got you this for you. It's northern, and she refuses to eat it because it's not from southern Italy.
Yeah, if you guys really want that experience, I recommend reading the Godfather book. It delves into a lot of like the difference between the North and the South. Yeah,
they're huge because like the north of Italy, the north down to the center has a strong strong Germanic influence and stuff too. I mean, not just in terms of a little culture, but like the people are actually descended from Germanic people. And so the meme about like Southern Italians looking a lot different isn't necessarily wrong. Like it is a stereotype for a reason. The culture is a lot different. And even in Sicily, the dialect is much different. They speak a different type of Italian. It's not the same as Northern Italian whatsoever.
Yeah,
that's right. And even like the Godfather novel also delves into the even different factions within the mafia. And so like, okay, the South had like, you know, the Cosa Nostra in Sicily, which is what Don Corleone is, and then the Camorra, that's what Furio in The Sopranos is part of, in
Yeah.
Naples. And then there's some other ones here and there. But then, okay, when push comes to shove, they all are united in the sense that they hate the North. You know, it's just funny to see all those different conflicts. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is making me hungry for pasta, Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I was in Italy, you had Sicily, which I would say they were halfway between stereotypical Southern Italians, but also they were very Lebanese in a way in terms of geography, their looks, some of the attitudes. I'd say you got that North African Mediterranean mix. So Sicily is pretty much Jamestown in Italy, or Turkmenistan, I guess, because Armenians aren't different as well.
If you ask Sicilians, not the ones here in America who've become more like pan-Italian, but the ones in Sicily, you ask them, "Are you Italian?" They'll say, "Yeah, we are, but we don't really speak Italian. We speak Sicilian."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, what about your food?" "Well, we learned this and that from the Arabs, so we're different. You know, we have different food. We don't eat your trash risotto and your stupid polenta. Like we have goat meat and like cool stuff here that
Yeah.
you guys don't have." So
Chicken marsala, baby.
Yeah.
yeah, I like both. They're both quite interesting. My dad went to Italy for a bit. I haven't been to Italy, but I've had a lot of discussions with Italians, and we have one in the chat a couple in the chat who are talking about, I don't even know, to be honest.
Two crooks.
Yep.
It's a weird question, but why are Armenians sometimes they look Persian and then sometimes they just look like Caucasian, as in like white? It's like really confusing.
What does that have to do with Tony Soprano?
Why are you brown? How dare
I
you?
don't know, like, I mean, like you know, like some Italians look like they're part of the SS, and then some Italians look like they're, you know, part of the Saudi royal family. Like, I don't know, just people migrate, change, like intermix all the time.
Yeah, it can be like that, and also geography. I mean, Armenia, you have like the mountains, which I think would give you more lighter features. It's colder, but you also have like the plains and whatnot. The more arid regions that would make you a bit more darker. It's the same reason why Semites, like Jim, for instance, half of them will have light hair, light skin, light eyes because they're more from Al-Sham, Bilad al-Sham, the Levant, while those who are more from the desert, they're gonna probably develop darker skin, curlier hair, and whatnot. And actually, with Armenians and Arabs, Assyrians, you put us in the sun for 5 minutes, we're gonna get really tanned, unlike white people who will get sunburned.
Well, what's interesting is that I think most people are. I think all of us are more pale than we ought to be. Even people from Germany should probably be a little darker than they are because none of us get enough sun. But whatever, that's a whole other topic. But with Armenia, it's interesting, and people always say like, "Oh, like Young Gamer," you just say, "Oh, how come some of you guys look like Persian and brown?" Well, if you ask certain groups, the Iranians were the original whole milk. So you just got you're done.
Iran, Iran will not let go of their country, meaning land of Aryans, anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm partially Semitic, so I can speak with similar experience. A lot of people actually ask me if I'm Armenian or Georgian or from the Caucasus. I don't know, like, what would you guys think? I'm curious. It's really the curly hair, and it's really like black is what people like get kind of confused.
I really wouldn't say that curly hair isn't that popular in Georgia. And plus,
that was just my anecdotal kind of thoughts.
I have to speak from my own experience. You know, I'm half Kazakh.
Are you Trent Horn?
Yeah, a lot of.
you look more. I'll be honest. You look more like Italian Jew, like a Jew from New York.
Italian Jew? What is?
Sorry,
Super New York.
There is Italian Jews. Yeah.
That's the super New York identity.
Oh, dude, you're not Ashkenazi. Get out of here with that crap. You're specifically an Italian Jew.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, right.
I'd say he would probably pass for Lebanese, like a Beiruti guy.
He could.
A lot of people ask me that too.
Like if he said he was from like somewhere, as my parents are from some obscure little mountain village, I would believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've basically been asked anything that isn't black or Asian. People have asked me those countries. Like a lot of Turkish, I get that. And I'm like, oh, I don't like Turkey. Stop asking me that.
Yeah. I mean, Turks can look all over the place. I think Iranians can too, but they do have a certain look. I can tell when someone isn't Iranian. I guess. But I can't
No,
always tell who someone is.
I met some Turkish people that I literally thought they were just like suburban white people, and I'm like, wait, you're Turkish? They're like, yes, I am Turkish. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, a lot of them are just Muslims from the Balkans that became.
Oh, that's right.
Turks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
They're like Albanians or like
Bosniaks.
from
Bosnians.
Macedonia or Bulgaria,
Yeah.
and they just became Turks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
there
we
are population changes.
yeah, and we are also are forgetting that it's technically the Turks in Central Asia who changed with all the Mongolian influence. The ones who left beforehand would still look whiter. They'd be like the Finns, Hungarians, Estonians, that steppe people.
yeah.
They actually are pretty pale Caucasian looking, but the ones who live near the Mongolians and the Chinese, the Kazakhs, for instance, those were the ones who tended to change. But also, as much shit I will give to Turkey, there were a lot of Muslims in the Balkans who were pretty much just expelled. They said, "Vamos, go on to Turkey," and Turkey will force its Muslim minorities to identify as Turkish, and that's a huge problem with the Kurds. But only the Kurds are able to successfully resist because they have large numbers, whereas, say, Balkan Muslim refugees, they had no choice but to identify as Turkish, and they were too small a number to do anything about it.
Well,
I think yeah.
Anatolian or Asia Minor Greeks also, or Greek-speaking people in Asia Minor became Greek when they went to Greece. You know, so like
Yeah.
there's some Greeks who aren't technically from Greece if you go back further enough. Yeah.
But those people that were like forcibly like Turkicized, like did they have to change their names? Like, do they have Turkish names or do they retain like Slavic and Greek things?
I
Goes
think they're
like
supposed to change, and that's
Just changed?
also why
Okay.
and that's also why the Kurds get pissed because Kurdish is an Indo-Aryan language, not related to Turkish at all. And again, right now it's mostly the Muslims who are forced to change. The Christian minorities still technically are Christian minorities, such as Bulgarians, Armenians, Greeks, and whatnot. But rather than assimilate and become Turkish or Turkic, they just leave, I guess.
Yeah.
And they still retain their names. If you're an Albanian Muslim in Turkey, after a while there will be pressure on you to become Turkish because according to their law or something, all the Muslims are Turkish, and God knows what they're doing to the Arab Muslims there. That cannot.
Well, the reason for that actually has nothing to do with the Ottoman Empire. So you know what? I got to pull up an Ottoman map. We're so not talking about TV anymore, which is fine.
I was gonna say the Sopranos and how it relates to the Ottoman Empire.
Well, this is I gotta go in a few minutes anyway, so it's fine for me when the ending like kind of wails off. But I do want to. Yeah,
that's just the nature of podcasts. I do, and that's how it works.
Tony Soprano's Jungian archetype matches the map of the Ottoman Empire.
Now, does Silvio look like a Balkan Turk, or is he from West Armenia? Anyway, so
yeah, where are you going, chat?
Yeah, so basically, this is some okay map. It's a French map of the Ottoman Empire, even better. But
nice.
But the point is, with the Ottoman Empire, what's interesting is that it was really, I don't want to say it's Third Rome or anything, but they tried to do that. And so Ottoman Turkish had many Persian loanwords and Arabic loanwords, and they wrote in the Arabic script, kind of like how Farsi is written. And actually, Ottoman upper class thought that the word Turk was an insult, like calling someone a Bedouin. So they didn't say, I am a Turk. They would say, I'm an Ottoman or I'm a Muslim. That was it. So when Ataturk came after the War of Independence, he wanted a ethno-national identity like the Europeans had, like French, Spanish, Italian, etc. So he forcibly made everybody who was a Muslim equals Turk, and Turkey equals the land of Muslims who speak Turkish. And so they changed it to the Roman alphabet firstly, and then they just made anybody who was a Muslim, except for the Kurds they weren't successful with, into a Turk. And that's why they got rid of all the Christians too, because they wanted to do the European ethno-state where everybody has the same religion, same language for the most part. And that's why you had all these Muslims from Macedonia and Bulgaria who became Turks, and many people who never left Anatolia, who may just look perfectly Anatolian, but they might not have identified as a Turk. They just might have said, I'm an Ottoman Muslim. So the kind of Turkish identity thing is new, and you can't really be a Turkish supremacist and a pan-Ottomanist at the same time. Like you like the Ottomans or you like the national Turkey. but you can't be both because Ottomans didn't call themselves Turks. They didn't care about that.
Yeah, and I do apologize if I did say it was an Ottoman policy that forced the Muslims to identify as Turkish. I know it's a post-World War I kind of thing, although it is interesting because Ataturk, as far as I know, hated Islam and religion, but nonetheless, to him, if you were quote-unquote Muslim, you would have to identify as Turkish, and this really pissed off the Kurds and the Arabs.
Well, and the other way around too. Like he knew he couldn't just destroy all of religion, but he would weaken it a little, and he would basically say, look, everyone's going to be a Muslim anyway, so Muslims are Turks. End of story. And this is the Turk land, and you're going to be a Turk if you live here. That's all he cared about. Like, he didn't care. He didn't actually give a rat's donkey about theology. He didn't care if the Greeks believed in the Trinity. It made nothing to him. He didn't care. So that's what's really interesting about Turkey and kind of weird. A lot different. That's why a lot of Turks will look down at Arabs sometimes, because they think Arabs are like these fanatics. Like, they kind of view Arabs and Pakistan the same way. Like, oh, you guys didn't have a way to reform your society the way the Turks did. So
it's like how Germans view Austrians. Okay, you guys talk a little funny. You're a little too religious. Okay, you guys are kind of yodeling too much in the mountains.
In the mountain. Well,
okay, Jim, I have to go, but can I say one more thing?
Yeah, I've got to go in a minute anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember the point we were talking about earlier of contrast the characters' lives with the Catholicism. And I brought up the joie de vivre, the joy of life, right? I was thinking, you could do a stream about it, or maybe it's a concept more familiar to me because I'm Catholic. I could just make a video about it, about like Catholic versus Protestant lifestyle. It's like the Chad joie de vivre versus the Virgin Protestant work ethic or something like that.
Oh yeah, that would be an interesting topic. That got brought up recently. Who blamed the Protestant work ethic? There was a Catholic channel.
Brian Holdsworth. Yeah. My buddy just talked to me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't watch it. So what's his thing about? What's the thesis here?
Oh, I remember it.
Yeah. You go ahead, yeah.
It's okay, so there used to be a distinction. The priest is doing the holy work.
Yeah.
But now, because we're all believers, bro, we're all in this together. Now, it's everyone. It's your truth. It's mine. Just kidding. It's you participate in God's work, and so does everyone else.
Yeah, that is. I'll check it out. I thought that was pretty interesting, but that would be a good topic for the future.
Yeah, it's also related, Jim, to like there's some Protestants. I mean, it's not necessarily the same anymore, but a lot of the Protestant theology is still prevalent. Actually, a lot in secular people. Yeah. There's some people that it's like the more you work, the more likely you're gonna get into heaven. If you are a fruitful person, that's a sign that you're part of the elect. It's out of Calvinist theology, right? And so that's why a lot of them thought okay, if you're sick and you can't work or you choose not to work, that's a sign that you're going to hell.
Yeah, there's a sign for that. That's for sure. A lot of the Catholic theology stuff is interesting. We already talked about the whole living life idea, but there's also other things that are involved in Catholic theology that people don't really think about. I think a lot of it has to do with liberals can take advantage of kind of the more mystical side of Catholic theology, I feel.
Yeah.
And you could probably do the same for Eastern Orthodoxy, where you can find a very mystical side and make that's the way to God. So let's just make that as vague as possible, and then I can attack anybody who's remotely conservative because, hey, I believe in that God too, kind of. So see a lot of those ideas, and people get their universalism from Christianity. So, that's always a hot topic.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating concept, and that's just why, similar to when I first got on the stream talking about the ethnography and how do I what do I feel in common with other people, and that's why I feel more in common with someone who's Italian or Mexican a lot more often than my own countrymen who we don't really believe in the same things at all in our day-to-day life. What we do and what we value is just, we have next to nothing in common other than we speak American English,
Well, America is kind of interesting in that. I feel like if we all were doing this podcast / stream in Germany, we'd have a lot of different things to talk about. The society would be different. But with America, it's the idea of what is America, what's America about, means so many different things to so many people. So All right, guys. Well, I've got to go in a second, so I'm just going to close out for now. But thanks, everybody. William, Kai, Young Gamer, Two Crooks, and Ahmed, and everyone else who popped in.